Hi, third graders. We are here today with PAX. I'm actually going to read chapters 8 and 9 just so we get moving a little bit with our book. So tune in and I hope you enjoy. The sound Peter most loved in the world, the leather-to-leather smack of ball and glove, was so real in his dream that he smiled as he opened his eyes, but then yelped in shock. A woman stood over him, tossing a baseball into a glove. She wore patched overalls with faded bandanas knotted along the straps, and her hair was a spiked mess that shook as she cocked her head to study him. He scrambled backward along rough wooden floorboards, crying out again, this time at the pain shooting up from his right foot. It all came back fast. In rising panic, he looked around for his pack. There it was, behind the woman, its contents strewn across the floor. She came closer and thumped the ball into the glove a little harder. His ball and his glove, Peter realized. The ball that had been in his pack. The glove he'd been sleeping on. He strained up. Hey, that's my stuff. What are you doing here? At that, the woman threw back her head and barked something between a laugh and a snort. She pitched the ball and glove away and crouched down to eye him, one hand wrapped around a clutch of feathers she wore on a rawhide strip around her neck. This close, Peter could see that she wasn't as old as he thought. Not much older than his father, anyway. A single gray streak bolted through her hair, but her skin was smooth. When she narrowed her eyes and snapped her fingers at his face, it dawned on him that the woman might be crazy. No. This is my barn, and you broke into. So what are you doing here would be my question. Peter scooted back. Crazy or not, the woman standing over him had a wall full of hatches and scythes behind her, and he was 1 foot short of running a pair. Okay, right. I hurt my foot last night. I passed your barn, and I needed a place to stay. So, look, I'll go. Not so fast. What do you mean? You passed my barn. This is private property in the middle of nowhere. The woman straightened to her full height, and Peter edged back even farther. I was taking a shortcut home from the practice he'd been to the day before. It flashed before him. He nodded to his ball and glove from batting practice. You were coming home through my land from batting practice? Then the first thing I am wondering is, why don't you have a bat? She tossed a hand toward his stuff. Why, you carry a roll of duct tape, garbage bags, and a charm bracelet, clothing, food, and water, but no bat, eh, boy? The way she said boy, silky and stretched out to 2 syllables, made him realize she had the hint of an accent. Only a hint, as if sometime in her childhood people around her had spoken a language that was close to singing. Well, I left it. A bat's heavy to carry around. The woman shook her head again, and this time she looked disgusted. She yanked up the left leg of her overalls. Below the knee, her leg was a rough wooden post. She stabbed it down beside Peter. Now this leg is heavy, boy. Solid heart pine, but I carry it around, don't I? The woman peered down at it and seemed to discover something she didn't much like. She pulled a knife from her belt and with a flick of her wrist, shaved off a chink from just above where her ankle would have been. Then she straightened to face Peter again, the knife jabbing directly at him. So let's try this one more time, because I'm very curious now. If you were at batting practice, how is it you don't have a bat? Peter dragged his gaze up to the woman's face and then back down to the knife. The blade gleamed long and thin with an evil-looking curve to it. She was probably crazy, all right. Probably worse. His heart stuttered in his chest and his mouth was a desert, but he managed to answer, I don't own one. The woman flashed a half grin and a quick wink. Better. Yes, that has the feel of truth. What's your name? Peter told her. So, no bat, Peter. What's this about your foot? Peter kept his eye on the knife as he peeled the sweatshirt from his foot. The pain of just that slight movement shocked him. Shudders racked him, and for the first time he realized how cold he was. I twisted it. The woman crouched down, her wooden leg angled out awkwardly. Peter looked away. Don't move. Before he could even register what was happening, the woman slipped the cold blade of her knife inside his sock and with a quick stroke slid it open. She pressed his lips together to keep from crying out. His foot was as dark and swollen as an eggplant. You walked on this? Peter pointed to the branch beside him. I broke it off, made a cane. His finger was shaking. He dropped his hand. The woman nodded again and then cupped her hands around his heel. I'm going to move this around, she warned. You ready? No, don't touch it. But the woman began to probe his foot, calling commands. Move your big toe, now all of them, and the foot side to side. Peter winced at the pain, but he did everything she asked. You're lucky, she said, setting Peter's foot down onto his sweatshirt. A non-displaced fracture of the fifth metatarsal. A metatarsal is like a toe. That's a single clean break in the outermost bone of your foot. Lucky? How is a broken bone lucky? The woman reared back, slammed her wooden leg down near his hand, and then stabbed her blade into the wood. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. How is only a broken bone lucky? Okay, I get it. Sorry. She tugged the knife from her leg and pointed it at him. You're young. You'll be in a cast for maybe 6 weeks. Healed just fine. How do you know this stuff? Are you a doctor or something? I was a medic. Another life. The woman hoisted herself up and looked down at Peter as if she'd just put it together. A runaway. She crossed her arms over her chest and cocked her head at him. Yes, are you running away? No, I was just out hiking. She clapped her hands to her ears and frowned. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. My lie detector was going off. Try again. Are you running away from home? Peter sighed. Not exactly. Then what exactly were you doing last night, passing through my land with your extra clothes and your supplies? No bat, Peter. Well, I'm not running away from home. I'm running away to home. Ooh, that's a twist. Continue. Peter looked out the window over the workbench. Tall pines pierced a pale morning sky, and a bunch of crows argued noisily in the top branches. If there were a story he could tell that would get him out of this barn and back onto the road to Pax, he would tell it. He would disappear into that day, fractured fifth metatarsal and all. But if such a story existed, he couldn't think of what it was. He slumped against the wall. The war, it's heading for our town. They'll take the river. My dad had to go serve. My mom died, so it's just us. So he brought me. How old is this father of yours? What? He's 36. Why? Then he didn't have to do anything. If there's a draft, it's for 18 to 20-year-olds, still kids, easy to brainwash. So if your father went, he volunteered. It was his choice. Let's start the story off with the truth. That's the rule around here. Okay, sure, he chose to go. And he brought me to my grandfather's inn, and you don't like it there. That wasn't it. It was, could you put it that way? The woman looked down and seemed surprised to find the knife in her hand. Such bad manners, Vola. She chided herself. We've forgotten how to behave with a guest. She tossed the knife onto the workbench. Go on. Okay, I have a fox. We turned him loose. We left him on the side of the road. My dad said he had to, but I should never have done it. Since that instant they'd driven away, Peter had been tormented by the things he should have said to his father. They all came rushing out now. I raised him from a kid. He trusted me. He won't know how to survive outside. It doesn't matter that he's just a fox. That's why my father calls him just a fox, as if he's not as good as a dog or something. Yes, you were plenty angry, so you ran. I wasn't angry. I'm not. It's that my fox, he depends on me. I'm going to go back and get him. Well, now you're not. Change of plans. No, I have to get him and take him home. Peter rolled to his knees, swallowing the gasp of pain that shot from his foot. He grabbed the branch and tried his weight on it for a second, then sank back down, exhausted from just that. Now, you still think this? How far away did you leave him? 200 miles, maybe more, Peter admitted. Vola snorted. You wouldn't make it 2 miles now. You'd be nothing but bear bait out there. That is if you didn't die of hypothermia the first night. You won't be able to move enough to keep warm. She leaned back against the workbench, winding a scarf around her finger, and Peter could tell she was just trying to figure something out. She didn't look crazy now, just in deep thought, and maybe worried. Then she seemed to come to a decision. Someone is bound to come looking for you. I can't have that. I need you gone. But I can't send you out like this. I have enough on my conscience. I will bind that foot and give you something for the pain, something that's legal to give a child. And then, I'm not a child, I'm almost 13. Vola shrugged. And then you will leave. There's a garage not far down from the highway. Call this grandfather of yours and have him come get you. I'm not going back. I'm going to get my fox. Not like this you're not. You cannot bear weight on that broken foot until the bone heals. 6 weeks at least. Maybe you try again then. 6 weeks? No, that would be too late. My fox. Remember, boy, I know a little something about traveling on one leg. To get around before that bone heals, you'd have to learn to carry yourself from your shoulders and your arms. You'd have to become strong in new ways. Almost impossible for an adult, never mind a child. I'm not a child. Vola swept up a silencing hand. So you will go back now and have that broken foot set, but first I will bind it for you and fix you something better than that branch to walk with. Vola pushed herself off the workbench and left the barn. Peter watched her disappear down a pine-framed path, rolling with a limp so deep that it looked painful. Then he crawled across the floor and stuffed his belongings back into his pack. He pulled himself up to the workbench, then effort made him dizzy, and he had to white-knuckle the wood until his head cleared. His foot throbbed fiercely when he was upright, and by testing it slightly, he knew he wasn't going to be able to walk on it. Vola would bind it, though. He'd be able to walk on it then. He had to. He hoisted himself onto the bench to wait. He hadn't been able to see much of the barn that night before, even with the flashlight. Now he took it in, and the floor was swept bare, with bags of seed and fertilizer stacked neatly by the door. The place smelled of clean hay and wood, and not of animals, although he could hear chickens nearby. The workbench took up a whole gable wall of the barn. It was lined with small tools and pieces of wood. Opposite, dark against the bright rectangle of the doorway beside it, draped burlap covered a bunch of things mounted on the wall. Another convulsion of shivers shook him. This time not from cold. The covered mounds were shaped like human heads. Any number of perfectly harmless things could be hanging on a barn wall, but what they really looked like were human heads. His throat went dry, and his heart began to kick hard. He'd been stupid and careless. Probably the crazy woman was going to let him go. Why wouldn't she let him go? But maybe she wasn't. He found the knife she'd left and wrapped his palm around its smooth grip. Vola had the upper hand in whatever was going to happen between them, and that didn't mean he couldn't defend himself. He slid the blade into his pocket just as she appeared in the doorway. Drink this. She handed Peter a mug and set a bowl beside him. Peter sniffed at the mug. Cider. There's a measure of willow bark in it, so drink it all. Willow bark? Aspirin in the wild. Peter put the mug down. He wasn't going to drink a crazy woman's brew. Suit yourself. Vola took up the bowl, began stirring the green paste inside with her finger. What's that? Poultice, with arnica and the bruising of comfrey and the broken bone. She gestured for him to prop his foot on the bench. The poultice felt cool and soothing as she eased it over the hot, tight skin. She untied a bandana from her overall strap and wrapped it around his foot, binding it with a second scarf so it felt secure. Then she straightened up, wiping her hands on her overalls. How tall are you? 5'3". Why? Vola didn't answer. She rummaged through a stack of lumber, brought several long, narrow pieces over to a pair of sawhorses, and began sawing them into paired lengths. The cut wood smelled fresh and clean. As she nailed short boards across the top of the two longer ones, Peter understood. Crutches. She was making him a pair of crutches. The knife he'd stolen grew heavier across his thigh. In a few minutes, Vola had angle braced the top boards and screwed on hand rests. She measured the crutches against him, then sawed an inch off the bottom of each. Then she rolled out an old tire from the corner of a barn. She went to the workbench. She scanned its lengths. Peter's cheeks burned as she turned to him. Did you take my knife? Her voice had turned dangerous, like something that could burst into flame and peel the roof off the barn. Peter felt dizzy and his heart began to thud again. He pulled the knife out and handed it to her. Why? Peter swallowed hard. His words were gone. Why? Because I was afraid you might kill me. Kill you? She eyed him hard. What? Because I live out in the woods, that makes me a murderer? Peter raised his shoulder toward the wall of bladed tools. My tools? I have 20 acres of trees to care for, and I'm a wood carver. You thought they were weapons? Peter looked away, ashamed. Look at me, boy. He turned back. Maybe you are not wrong, she said, locking his gaze. Maybe you see something. Maybe I am. She raised her hands slowly, pinched her fingers together in front of Peter's face, then suddenly flicked them open. Boom! Dangerous, like that. No warning. Peter flinched. No, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Vola shot a palm at him and spun away. She cut 4 strips of rubber from the tire, then wrapped them around the crutch tops and grips and secured them with twine in silence. She held the crutches out. Peter placed one under each arm and eased himself to the floor. It was an immediate comfort to be upright and balanced with his injured foot safely tucked up. Take your weight on the palms, lift yourself, don't hang, plant the crutches, then swing through. Peter began to thank her, but Vola cut him off again. At the end of my road is the highway. Head left, and in a quarter of a mile you'll come to a gas station. You figure it out from there. She helped him into his backpack and then turned away, picked up a block of wood and began to shave off slices as if he were no longer in the barn. Peter tried to step toward the door. He wobbled a little, but not much. That was a hop, Vola said without looking up. I said swing through. Now get out of here. For a moment, Peter didn't move. He didn't know where he was headed, only that it sure wasn't back to his grandfather's. Vola turned and leaned toward him, pinched her fingers together, and shot them out at him again. Go while you're still safe. All right, we are on to chapter 9. Approaching the meadow from the forest above, Gray stopped suddenly, nose in the air. Again, he lifted his muzzle to test the scent more carefully. Stronger. Pax, already hesitant, tensed. Gray hurried to the edge of the trees. A loner is challenging me. He wants this territory, but his display is for the young vixen's benefit. She will choose a mate this winter. Pax followed and took in the scene below him. 4 foxes dotted the meadow. Bristle and Runt stood together, their black-tipped ears perked forward warily towards the other 2, who faced each other on the ledge of a rock, halfway down. One of these was a vixen, darker than Bristle and big-bellied with kits. The other was a large male with rough, tawny fur. His hackles were up and his left ear was split. Gray barked to announce his presence. The challenger spun off the ledge, an arc of blood sprang from his ear and bolted down the meadow. Gray picked his way down the hillside, Pax following. As Gray passed Bristle and Runt, his very presence seemed to calm them, as if he were an unseen hand stroking their backs. As soon as he passed, Runt danced his excitement at seeing Pax, but Bristle curled a lip and hissed. Pax hurried after Gray. When Gray climbed to the ledge beside his mate, Pax dropped to its base and sat respectfully. Gray's mate greeted him with affection, then she shared news. The wind this morning was far from the west. It brought the scent of fire. We must move soon. She looked out at Pax. The outsider smells of humans. Bristle and Runt edged closer, ears cocked towards Gray's response. He is returning to the humans he lived with in the south. I will travel with him to search for a suitable place to move. He and I will rest, then leave tonight. Behind him, Bristle growled again, and Pax felt the urge to run. His boy, he wanted only to find his boy, but instinct told him that he needed rest and food first. He signaled his agreement, and then Gray and his mate glided silently into the green meadow. Runt bounded over and tumbled into Pax. He dropped the toy soldier from his cheek, inviting Pax to play. Bristle jumped between them and swatted the toy away. Humans, remember the danger. Runt retrieved the toy and displayed it between his teeth, defiant. Pax sensed that Runt was now in more trouble than before, and that he was the cause. He'd felt that way often with his boy and his father, and one of the strategies he had to disappear if they would protect his boy from the man's anger. He backed away, but Bristle was not satisfied. Stay away from the human stinker, she warned her brother. Remember the danger. Pax took a step closer. My humans are not dangerous. Runt seemed alarmed by this, as if Pax had issued a challenge. He darted uphill toward his den entrance, but his sister was quicker. She blocked him, and when he tried to slink away in another direction, she restrained him with a heavy paw until he stilled in defeat. All humans are dangerous. Pax's fur ruffled in a shiver at the scene Bristle conjured. Then, wind, cold and howling, and heavy with the threat of snow. Pax recognized that wind. The story she was about to relate would end with blood on the snow and cold steel jaws. Bristle barred her fangs at Pax and then began. Whew. Well, thank you guys for tuning in and listening, and I'll be back tomorrow with chapter 10. Have a good day, guys.